Hello, hello, hello. Wanted to go live real quick and share something that was just in my inbox, and it's regards to violence against nurses is worse than ever. So there's certain words in this article where I can't say too often because YouTube will flag the video. But that being said, please leave in the comments if you have ever been a victim as a nurse of a patient being violent, a patient or family member being violent towards you, whether it's physical or verbal. I've definitely experienced both. I've worked in psych, and I've also worked at a retail clinic where there's not the normal barriers between you and a patient, and you really are the everything for the patient, the secretary, the receptionist, the person that scans the insurance. So when it's in a setting like that, it's very conducive to this. So all right, let's see here. Let's get started. All right. So like I said before, thank you. So Yalitza, let me add Yalitza's comment. So Yalitza is saying, as a CNA, a patient saying derogatory comments. Exactly. Yes. We've experienced that. And so what this study found, or what these statistics are finding, is that on average, 57 nurses are, this word, I don't want to say it because it'll flag, but 57 nurses are attacked every day in the US. That's 2 nurses attacked every hour. And there's very few protection for nurses because it's a female-dominated profession. So what are some solutions? What are some solutions that should be implemented going forward as a response to this? Because I think it's unacceptable that we are just there doing our jobs and we're being attacked. So Press Ganey did a survey, and in a 3-month period from April to June, 5,217 attacks occurred at 483 facilities. Nurses faced the highest number of attacks in the psychiatric units and emergency departments, right? Like I said, I used to work in psych, and unfortunately, there were situations at my facility where nurses were actually, Nurse Liz always says, clocked out instead of saying another word, but they were permanently clocked out by patients that were coming in. They were very psychotic, agitated. So it has happened. And then in the ED again, people are not on medications, and there's a lot of emotions, and they can tend to act out. While patients were most likely to attack nurses, attacks were also initiated by family members, coworkers, visitors, intruders, and most of the attackers were men. So keep in mind that nursing is a predominantly female profession. There has been work to make it a profession that men see that is worth going into, but it's been predominantly female profession. And the only thing that I can think of too is, I mean, men do tend to be more violent than women, period. That has to do with the testosterone. But on top of that, as you know, bullies tend to pick on people that they know they can win a fight against, right? If nursing was a profession that was predominantly 6'4" men, super like bulky, I can guarantee you that the attacks would be much less likely, or they would be occurring at a much less rate. And it's kind of sad that because it's females, we are seen as weaker, and therefore we're being attacked more. It was important to note that, so Yalitza says yes, especially like if you're shorter, again, female, we're just seen as weaker. We don't know what we're doing. If you're just tuning in, leave a comment and let us know if you've ever experienced physical attacks, verbal attacks by patients. It's very common. It'll just help the public know what we deal with on a daily basis, and also let us know, what do you think a solution could be? Also, so other than the ED and psych units, pediatric burn, rehabilitation, and surgery units also face frequent that word. So again, you have a lot of heavy emotions when it comes to those units, and sometimes it manifests in a lot of verbal violence and sometimes physical violence. But again, what kind of society are we in that we think that it's acceptable to go hit somebody else? Like, that should not be acceptable. Use your words, as they say. We need to teach men that using how to recognize their frustration and their anger. Or actually, we need to teach boys, right? Because by now men are set in their ways. But men, that old saying of boys don't cry, that just leads to toxic masculinity. Violence against healthcare workers has long concerned nurse groups, right? But the problem is that it's getting worse. According to a 2021 American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations report on worker safety rates of workplace violence, it's almost doubled. So workplace violence has almost doubled since 2010. The report also noted that during the same decade, workplace violence rates for hospitals increased 95%, specifically 98% in psychiatric hospitals. So it's 149% higher. I mean, that's, instead of going in a downward trajectory, we are going in the wrong direction. And interventions, things need to be done. Anecdotally, we're seeing there's been more and more violence as more and more people distrust the healthcare system. And unfortunately, medicine and healthcare should not be seen as Republican or Democratic. But unfortunately, there have been certain issues that have been politicized, leading certain groups to think that something is fake news and therefore distrust the healthcare system. And then when you don't trust the healthcare system, you're more likely to be disrespectful, to act out. And this is in regards to what Yalitza was saying earlier, that as a CNA, there you guys are, again, right there with the patient. Who interacts more? Despite what, I've never seen Grey's Anatomy, but despite what Grey's Anatomy shows you, or Scrubs, the majority of the time, the profession that spends the most time with the patients are going to be like the CNAs and the nurses, right? Doctors come in, or physicians come in, and they will briefly talk with a patient. They'll get a history and they will leave and put in their orders, right? But as nurses and CNAs, we are there constantly. We are frontline all the time. So Yavel's tuning in. That's actually my husband. He said nurses very rarely press charges, so they know they can usually get away with it. And this is exactly what at the end I'm going to talk about. It's very sad what hospitals are telling people when they're actually attacked. Yalitza says laws that are set in place and actually reinforced. I believe it is a federal offense to attack hospital employees, but is it enforced? Exactly. And that's the question. Is it enforced? And most of the times it is not. So why do you think that they are not enforcing, or why is the hospital so hesitant for us to press charges? Violence towards nurses has reached an alarming rate, nearing, if not already, an epidemic. We are calling on all healthcare leaders to declare zero tolerance for hostility toward healthcare workers. And this is a cultural change that needs to happen in healthcare. We need to stop blaming the nurses. We need to stop blaming. It's like it's victim shaming. So you get punched in the face, and all of a sudden it's like, what could you have done differently? How could you have de-escalated the situation, right? Especially if it's in the ED, charges need to be pressed. Also in psychiatry, patients should know that there's zero tolerance. And honestly, I experienced more hostility in a retail clinic than on the psych unit. It's alarming, but I did. Improve caregiver well-being and advance our shared commitment to zero harm. So Press Ganey suggested steps that healthcare organizations can take. and it's formal policies to identify risk, response plans, post-incident support, and training programs that teach de-escalation techniques. So I agree with programs that teach de-escalation techniques. Sometimes we're not aware of how we come across, so it's important to become self-aware. Brogan said that requiring better staffing ratios is key. The more staff you have, the less likely you are to be a victim of violence. De-escalation training is also critical. Sometimes things as small as body language can make a big difference. But again, the last thing that I would like that I don't even see them putting in there is, for example, if I know for me, if anyone were to ever hit me in the, like if I'm working at a retail clinic and someone hits me, I'm calling the police. I don't care what my boss tells me. I don't care what my job tells me. So as healthcare workers, as nurses, as CNAs, whoever you are, as physicians, be okay with calling the police and pressing charges, because that is the only way. If there are consequences to the behavior, that's the only way things are going to start changing. Because if we just say, oh, you shouldn't have done that, and there's no consequences, we're going to continue to be attacked. So being okay with pressing charges, I'm not sure, but many years ago there was this girl that got groped. She was a server and a guy walked by, gropes her. It's caught on camera. She calls the police, and he was actually sent to jail, right? And a lot of people were criticizing her for saying, like, first of all, thank God it was caught on camera, because she said, so Yulissa says, yes. So thank God that it was caught on camera, because the guy was saying, oh no, I didn't touch her. I just brushed up against her. And then when they played back the video, it showed it was a full on groping session, right? And kudos to her for actually pressing charges, because as women, we get groped, we get this, and sometimes we just pass it off like, guess that's part of being a female, right? I guarantee you, this guy got arrested. I guarantee you he will think twice before he ever gropes another woman again. So if we call the cops on someone and they get arrested, they will think twice next time they want to punch one of us in the face. So the last thing that it says in addition, hospital administrations must also support their staff. Brogan stressed, citing the disconnect between administrators and clinical staff. And there is such a huge disconnect between administrators and clinical staff. I can't tell you how, I mean, we all know, if the people up top if they spent one day, you know that show like Undercover Boss, if they spent one day trying to do our job with the 6 patients they give us, right? I'm talking about the people, charge nurses or our managers and the CEOs that often have MBAs and they are not RNs, and they're making decisions for RNs even though they have no idea. If they spent one day working our shift, seeing everything we go through, I guarantee you they would not be giving us 6 to 7 patients on med tele and 4 or 5 on PCU and 3 on ICU. They would see how dangerous it is. So the administrators need to get it together, and this disconnect that you don't understand what it's like to be in our shoes needs to stop. You need to get off your high horse. You need to get off your big castle and come down in the trenches and see what it's like down here in the trenches. So the nurse will have an awful photograph of themselves bruised, battered, he said, explaining that the nurses have reported going to management only to be encouraged to not press charges and ask what they could have done better. The administrators are not being attacked. They're just not. And again, I can't say that word again for reasons. So again, because they don't know what it's like. And you know what? Being attacked, but what's worse is being on the verge of knowing you're about to be attacked. When you're a nurse, when you're a CNA, you're in there, you're dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. You don't know if that's the day that patient will actually lash out at you, or if they're going to restrain themselves, because we're around patients enough that we've seen many of them get to that point, but they don't actually follow through. So administrators never have to deal with that, right? It's very easy to criticize someone. How could you have done things differently if you've never had to be in that situation, if you've never had to live it? So if you are watching this and you are not in healthcare, but you're just watching it because you're watching this, thank you. And please, let's just be better human beings to each other. Like I don't understand, why are we becoming more like, it's like we're just more dehumanized, we're less empathic, less compassionate. This is another human being that's just trying to do their job. This is inexcusable. And if you're a nurse, it's okay to press charges. Listen, there's such a shortage of nurses right now that many facilities, if you just walk on the unit, they'll take you. So if you are threatened in any way, and if they're like, if you press charges, then you can't work here, press charges, because we have to stand up. If no one stands up, then things will not change and things will continue to get worse. So that is the rant for today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you hit the like button. Make sure that you subscribe. And I will see you next time, my friends.